Monday the 27th. I went downtown with my suitcase, got my last shot from Uncle Howard, and told him to send the bill home, and said goodbye to Mr. Montgomery, and had lunch. In the afternoon, after going downtown again for a registered letter, I packed my trunk and left it in the hall at the boarding house. Put everything that was left on my back, and to the shocked surprise of Miss Mock, I started out to hitchhike to Colorado Springs. I walked 10 or 11 miles, and then after 2 short lifts, I got a ride right into the springs. I got there at 10 in the evening. I was advised twice on the way to make use of side door Pullmans. They are very lenient in this state. Tuesday, the 28th. This morning I gave the town the once-over and bought a book. The town was very interesting and very attractive, and I still have to find out what the book is like. It fits into my pocket very well and has a good binding. It is Essays of Elia by Lamb. In the afternoon, I took an amble through the low foothills to the southwest of here. The plains are very dry and uninteresting. There is a lot of yucca, and in some places sage, but very little else. The western meadowlarks certainly know how to sing, but the robins are not nearly so musical as those of home. There are mountain bluebirds and some swallows I haven't identified as yet. One strange feature of this country is the wind. I was walking down the middle of the road and a little whirlwind swept down one side, and I was in a hot atmosphere without a stir of wind. Then at times I would be in a miniature tornado and the grass at the roadside would be motionless. Now I have really started my venture. There is more within a day's walk of the springs than there is within a day's ride by auto of Denver. Wednesday the 29th. What a way to begin. I got lost in the mountains. I got out into the hills beyond Wood Somebody's sanatorium and found myself in the bottom of a cup with a very high rim. The only way to get out was the way I came in, and I did not want to do that, so I climbed the rim at its lowest point and descended into another cup and found that there was a pass I could have taken and got into the second cup without climbing. Then, in getting out of the second cup, I made the same mistake and found that I had climbed the rim at about the highest part. It was so high that I could only go about 100 or 200 feet at a time. My pulse would go up to 150. Then I would stop and get my breath, and it would go down to 90. Now all this time the sun was getting low, and a storm was coming up from the mountains, and a heavy mist was rolling down from the north. I thought going down would be easy, but no such luck. Twice I came to a spot where the only way to descend was to drop a few hundred feet onto some loose rock. The only comfortable way to keep on going was to climb a few hundred feet and then go back down another ridge. I was racing at breakneck speed, hopping from rock to rock in a slide, a few acres of broken stone, then sliding down the gravelly side of the hill, taking the gravel with me. And when I got to the bottom, I had a mile of sage upland to walk through before I got to the road, which I accomplished just before dark, and a 2-mile walk into the town. The worst part of the whole business was the dryness of the atmosphere. Thursday the 30th. This afternoon I went into a store where Indian goods were on sale. The proprietor was named Alan, a Canadian from Montreal. There were a great many fine pieces in the collection. The Indians are quite skilled in working silver and turquoise. The men wear the most jewelry, rings, bracelets, 2 or 3 inches wide, and belts, leather with silver buckles and studs which shine along the belt. I, of course, found one that I wanted very badly. It was $18. $10 because I was a Canadian and knew Montreal well. The assortment of rugs was quite large. He had one of the rugs belonging formerly to the Archbishop of Santa Fe. The hero in Willa Cather's Death Comes for the Archbishop. There were rugs made by the Navajo, the Utes, and the Pueblos, and dozens of other tribes whose names I forget. The designs varied, but there was no symbolism like that shown in the silverware. I could spend hundreds of dollars in that store and still not have everything that appealed to me. Of course, all this is exactly what the average tourist is likely to carry away, but it certainly has its appeal. The symbolism particularly. Thunderbirds for happiness, rattlesnake jaws for strength, the swastika for luck, the arrow for speed and success in the hunt, and many others. Friday the 31st. I went to Manitou today, and what an interesting place I found it. Subsisting almost entirely on the tourist trade and consequently rather dead just now. I went up to the Cave of the Winds, though I did not go in. From there, I hit back along the ridge above and to the west of Williams Canyon. Then I turned west and went back to Manitou by the Ute Pass. The day was perfect. The sun was shining all the time, and there was just enough of wind to make it pleasant. Pikes Peak looked very alluring, but mighty cold. There is still a lot of snow on it above the timberline. Down in the foothills, though, it is summer, and the air is very dry, and the dust is terrific. I saw some sort of jay, a very big bird with a very big crest, black with a green-blue on the shoulders. I also saw an Arizona woodpecker and a western chickadee. There were lots of tracks of deer. I also saw lots of tracks of unshod horses. Finally, on towards evening, I saw 2 wild horses, not very far off, above me on a hillside. They were a very fine pair. On my way back to Manitou, down Ute Pass, I met a laborer out of work who took me for one of the same class. He told me that I ought to join the United Labor Council in Colorado Springs. Just unemployed working men who's getting together to try and get enough power to make the who have all the money give us jobs. He wished me luck, said he was glad to have met me, and we went our various ways, somewhat enlightened. Saturday, the 1st of April. I wanted today. I spent most of my day doing nothing. I went to the Colorado Springs National Bank to see if I could get my draft cashed and found that I couldn't very easily. Then I tried to find someone who would develop my plates without charging a foolishly high rate, 10 cents each, but I couldn't. I will have to do my own developing, and I can't find anything to use for a darkroom. There was a storm in the offing, but it stayed there. Sunday the 2nd. Was spent as I like to spend Sunday, doing quiet things. I wrote a little, listened to the radio for a while, read for a while, and that is all. It was a very peaceful day. I did not go to church because I felt so contented and did not want anyone to antagonize me by disagreeing with my views from a pulpit. Monday the 3rd. This morning I made arrangements to get the draft cashed and went out in my hard time rags for a hike. I went up to Manitou and started out the Ute Pass. Before I had gone very far, I was picked up by a really typical American tourist from Bangor, Maine. He said that he had just come from the Royal Gorge and had been through Cave of the Winds and was headed for the Pikes Peak Road. There is a paved motor road to the top. But you know, he said, all these things are alike. Poor fool. How much he misses. I went up Waldo Creek and made a futile attempt to get into Williams Canyon. I landed up at the Cave of the Winds. Within a mile of the Cave of the Winds, I startled a deer, not 6 miles from Colorado Springs and 1 mile from a house. Imagine deer hunting in the valley below Ancaster. I also found 1 antler almost entirely consumed by porcupines. There is a mica in the rocks along Waldo Creek that is gold in color. It is only found, as far as I know, in very small pieces. There is also a lot of red limestone all over the lower foothills. Oh, there is so much to interest me. There are lots of hills and ridges, deep canyons and fast-flowing mountain streams. There are birds and animals, bugs and butterflies, not to mention clouds and trees. And that tourist said they are all alike. There is nothing alike. It is all different, everywhere you go. Tuesday the 4th. It snowed today. Wet snow, and because of the moisture, half of Colorado Springs was blowing noses and snuffling. It was the most comfortable day I had experienced since I came here. I went through the Cave of the Winds this afternoon. What a place. How I would like to be allowed to take all the pictures I wanted to. But $1.10 a visit, not counting the cost of photographic material. There are many surprising features of the cave. For instance, there are ribbon stalactites, thin horizontal ribbons on the roof of the cave with horizontal strata. Then there are dozens of fragile formations, thin as straw and 10 inches long, some of them. But on the ceiling, the most interesting formations are to be found: stalactites shaped like horizontal pretzels, like rose, branch, and brain coral, like seaweed, and all very delicate. Then there are clear, white, greenish, red, bronze, and dark brown stalactites and stalagmites. The whole cave contains only limestone, or rather carbonate of lime, with a bit of copper and iron in it to supply the coloring. The walls are mainly red-colored, but in one place, where a bit has been polished, the coloring is like onyx. Wednesday the 5th. I went to the Garden of the Gods this morning. They would interest Father because the strata are at all sorts of angles. The rock is almost all red. Limestone, I suppose. The wind often cuts very grotesque figures on columns and walls and ridges. In one place, there is a very interesting formation. There are 2 rows of rocks sticking out of the ground parallel to each other, about 15 feet apart. There is one particular gully which is filled with junipers between 700 and 1,000 years old. They are Juniperus monosperma, and there are quite a few of them. There are lots of crows and magpies in the garden. The crows are light blue in color and are very plentiful. They make a lot of noise, not very unlike the sound produced by our own variety. They were quite tame and let me come within a few feet of them. Thursday the 6th. I spent most of today on the magazine article. I may finish it someday. And also, being a very extravagant person, I bought a bracelet. It is a man's bracelet made by a Zuni, one of the Pueblo tribes. It is a plain strip of solid silver, bent to fit onto a man's wrist and decorated by asymmetrical carvings of a very conventional nature and unobtrusive design. There is one thing about buying such an object. It will always be worth at least the purchase price. The patterns are never duplicated, and they all show some of the individuality of the maker. Or perhaps I should say craftsman. This afternoon I walked out to Broadmore. I think it has all been built up since Mother used to come here. The houses are all rather new, and some of them are quite fine. It has the air of being a district of houses belonging to the finest people. Friday the 7th. I had a very long talk with Mr. Allen this morning. He told me the story of the snake dance of the Hopis, for one thing. Here it is. Many hundreds of years ago, a Hopi youth left home and wandered westward to the land of the Snake People. The Snake People are a tribe who have the power of changing themselves into snakes at will. Well, this Hopi youth fell in love with a very beautiful snake maiden and married her and took her home to his people. Their children were not Hopis, but were snake people. The Hopis were so incensed at the young man for marrying out of his own tribe that they sent him and his family away from the pueblo and forbade him to come near it again. Now the snake people, in their home by the Grand Canyon, were very much angered by the treatment, and they prevailed upon their gods to cause a great drought and ruin the Hopi country, and to appease the snake gods. The Hopi people developed this dance. Every summer, about the same time of year, they perform this dance, and it is always a sort of prayer for rain. Then there are the sand paintings. The medicine men make these paintings in colored sands on the floors of the council houses. The paintings are all done from memory. No sort of record is permitted, and at the end of the day on which they are made, they are destroyed. I could write pages and pages on what I learned. I could explain the rites and the symbols and the gestures used in the snake dance, the mysticism. Cure for rattlesnake bites possessed by the Hopis, far more efficient and effective than any known to the modern world. But I am lazy, and there is a lot I should do. I will have to trust to my memory for all that I do not put down. Saturday the 8th. Today I took a bus out to Broadmore and went from the end of the line to 7 falls. The falls were almost completely covered with ice. From the top of the falls, I went to see the grave of Helen Hunt Jackson, who wrote a book called Ramona and a poem called Cheyenne Mountain and some other works, and died in 1880 or something or other. I had never heard of her before. After giving the grave, marked by an enormous heap of rocks, the once over, I crossed some private property. Imagine anyone owning a mountain. And hit the Cheyenne Highway. I followed it for miles and got nowhere, so I was forced to return by the same route. The hills south of Colorado Springs are higher and more interesting than those to the north. Coming back down below Cheyenne Mountain, I came across a herd of 4 or 5 deer. They are slightly smaller than a horse and have enormous ears. They were rather tame and let me get close enough to take a couple of pictures of them. Sunday the 9th. Wrote and wrote, and then wrote. I wrote in my diary, I wrote on my article, and I wrote a letter or two. It snowed very hard this evening. Soft, wet snow. The country needs it. Monday the 10th. And today I wrote too. There were 6 inches of snow in the Denver district this morning. This will end a drought, which was causing a great deal of discomfort. This evening I tried to develop some plates and made such a bad mess of it that I quit after a considerable investment in equipment. I tried using a desensitizer and developing in candlelight. I completely wrecked 2 plates and did 2 others fairly badly. The 2 I wrecked were the 2 I took of the deer I saw last Saturday. Oh well, someday I will be able to take more and develop pictures properly. Tuesday the 11th. I climbed Cheyenne Mountain today. It is 9,300 feet above sea level. Colorado Springs is 6,037 above the sea. There is a motor road all the way up, which I followed part way. Above 8,000 feet, there was a lot of snow, and the people in the lodge at the top were very surprised to see me, and more surprised to hear that I walked all the way. The altitude had a very queer effect on me. I got all the way up very comfortably and felt perfectly all right till I started climbing the stairs to a refreshment stand in the top of the lodge. Then, for a few seconds, I could hardly see, and my ears ached. But it was all over before I knew what it was all about, and I felt better than ever. The trip down from the top was on the best trail I have seen since I came into this hilly country. It was a bridle path, and not very steep. It was under trees most of the way, like a corridor in a high, airy building. I got a lift from Broadmore into town by a chap who was a highway official, a man who drove a truck and turned on the red lanterns wherever there was an obstruction in the road. He told me to see the Carlsbad Caverns, and I promised to if I was ever in that part of the country. I looked very carefully for the deer, but did not see them again.
Bidding farewell to the stars and stripes.
Wednesday the 12th. I wrote. That is about all I did. I mailed 3 letters, one containing an appeal for funds. It was a day late, but I had a lot of incidental expenses yesterday, bus fare, developing my plate, and so on. I wonder what the family will think of the last batch of prints I sent home. They were from the plates and contained a few attempts at artistic arrangement and good composition. This evening blew in with a sandstorm. I think it is snowing now. Thursday the 13th. What a place. This morning it was cold and miserable, snow everywhere, the sidewalks icy, and the roads treacherous. By afternoon, it was just plain sloppy. However, it seems to be clearing up. Today, too, I did little but write. The weather is really unsuitable for anything else. And still, after all this writing, my letters home are insufficient. And there are dozens of people I ought to write to, and don't. Sometime I may get caught up. Friday the 14th. Today, tired of inactivity, I set out on a long hike. I started at Manitou and ended at the entrance to the Garden of the Gods. That sounds simple, but it was a long way. First, I walked right up Williams Canyon to the top, then climbed a rather high hill, which was no easy job. Then I walked down the other side of the hill, into Queens Canyon, and followed a creek down into Glen Erie, then walked along the highway to Colorado Ave. Williams Canyon was quite awe-inspiring, with its entrance between 2 steep walls of stone and the trees down in the bottom. Part of the way was once the road to Cave of the Winds, and the rest was through the trees, along a fairly clear trail. Queens Canyon, from above, looks like a very ordinary, uninteresting canyon, but what a false impression. All the way down to the glen, the creek wound down a slit in the rock about 400 feet deep, and sometimes less than 100 feet across the top. And how it twists. There were lots of right-angled turns and bends galore. Sometimes there was no trail. The only way to go on was to wade down the creek. Occasionally, the walls would come close together at a point where there was a deep pool. At one such place, there was a rotten log held with rusty wire along the face of the rock. It held me, but if I had been much heavier, I would have fallen in. At another place, the slope of the rock and my hobnails held me. At another, I pulled myself along with my fingertips, and when I finally get to see Glen Erie, I found that trespassers will be prosecuted, and the only way to get out was to climb a sheer cliff 100 or 200 feet high. I trespassed. Saturday, the 15th. It was the Garden of the Gods this time, and I climbed every rock pile I could. I sat under a juniper that was 900 years old. Imagine being a sapling, only 30 years old, at 1066, standing through century after century. And the trees are not big. They struggle on in rock and gravel, adding little of anything each year. A great deal of the rock is new, red sandstone and conglomerate. or I suppose that's what it is. The hills around here are composed very largely of a soft kind of rock which crumbles when it is touched. This is true mostly of the formations south of Fountain Creek. On the north, in Wilhelmina and Queens, and Black Canyon, it is mainly limestone. Occasionally, I find pieces of granite and quartz. There is a mica of a gold color everywhere. On some of the mountain roads, it really looks as if the streets were paved with gold. Sunday the 16th. I spent the day quietly. In fact, I did not get up till noon, and consequently, I had to make my own bed. I lived through that somehow. I did a great deal of thinking. I have plans for 2 more magazine articles. I will be able to illustrate one of them, and perhaps the other, before I get through. I spent all the money I had left today for food. I have 4 donuts and 3 oranges to stand between me and starvation tomorrow. Monday the 17th. Today, or this grand morning to be exact, I met a young chap named Leo Wilson. His mother lives out near Los Angeles. He has a very great desire to wander, and he knows the ropes fairly well. Very soon we had planned all sorts of things, the general idea being this: we would work our way to Hamilton, getting jobs here and there. Then, after Arthur's leave is over, we would go to Los Angeles, where he could get work for both of us. Then we would, after getting a little more money, go down to South America. And then, that was open for conjecture. It would mean a year off my schooling, but it would be some education. I waited for money until 2 o'clock. It did not arrive, and I was getting hungry. So I went out and tried to pawn my watch. But no one would take it. Finally, I found a lunch counter where it was accepted as security. By the time I got some food inside me, I was ready for it. How I passed the time, I don't know. I did play pool for 1 hour on credit and had a swim in the evening, but I was no longer hungry and little else mattered. It is great from being broke. Tuesday the 18th. My money came in this morning, and I was very glad to see it. The first thing I did was to buy my watch back again. Then Leo Wilson and I went out to the Garden of the Gods. I like that place, though I could wish for a place less frequented by tourists. The park's board is trying to keep it from being spoiled. I went into the Hidden Inn and found that if I had any good pictures of the district, I will be able to sell them there. I will be able to write the boss when I get home and can do a sample or 2. It would help my pocket very much. In the afternoon, I went to a show. It was Cavalcade, and it made me feel very strange. It was not the sadness of it that affected me, because that was counterbalanced by the triumph and the glory of it all, but still it had an effect. Perhaps it was a species of homesickness. I discovered that, though I liked to wander, still, there was something in me that called for a home. I knew that I would not wander very much longer without a bit of home and companionship. I could go on for a year, perhaps, but after that, I would have to go home, and the last few months would be uncomfortable. It took a long time to sort out my thoughts, but I am finding that a lot easier than it was before I came away.
All through the world I have wandered, leaving you far behind. Now that my heart is lonely, I waken just to
Hey everybody, it's Steve Welch. Thanks for checking out the documentary. My great uncle Ruthven Calhoun McNairn, his 4-month amazing journey in 1933. It was really fun making the movie. But it took me a while to figure out a lot of the things and get the context. So I've written a book in partnership with my great uncle Ruthven. I wrote the introduction and footnotes to give context to the diary, the people, places, and things that he saw along the way, and give a little color to the era, 1933. So check that out. If you purchase an ebook, certainly helps the channel, and I'm a completely independent filmmaker, so, and it's a great value. It's a great insight.
Cause the clouds wanna roll away.
So yeah, check out the website, stevewelchontario.com. Links to all my films and music. If you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free download of my latest album, Songs to Save Your Life. So check it out. Thanks for the support. Thanks for your interest. I would love to see comments. How did the movie strike you? What resonated with you? Comments are welcome. Peace out.
Oh, the clouds wanna roll away. Oh, the clouds wanna roll away. Now I don't care how hard it rains, cause the clouds wanna roll